Welcome back to Soft Psychology Club. I'm really glad that you're here for this one. I think so many people are going to relate to this. I want to start with something that I hear all the time from people that I work with, and honestly, people in my life too. It goes something a little like this. Someone has a free afternoon, they genuinely don't have anywhere that they need to be or anything really urgent that they need to do. But instead of actually enjoying it, they spend the whole time feeling vaguely terrible, like they're doing something wrong, like they should be doing something. Like everyone else is being productive and they're just being lazy. Or they finally take a nap and they wake up feeling guilty instead of feeling rested. Or Sunday evening arrives, and instead of feeling relaxed, there's this creeping dread. Not about anything specific, just that they didn't do enough, like a sense that they didn't do enough. And honestly, I have definitely been there too. I know that I'm a psychologist, which you might think would make me immune from this kind of thing, but honestly, it really doesn't. So today I want to talk about rest guilt, why we feel it, where it actually comes from, and what, if anything, we can do about it. I want to do it in a way that actually makes sense too, not just in a here are 5 tips kind of way. So let's get started. Firstly, what are we actually talking about? Rest guilt is that uncomfortable, almost itchy feeling you get when you're not being productive. It's the voice that says that you're wasting time the moment you sit down. It's lying on the couch or laying down for a quick nap and not being able to fully relax because some part of your brain is running a to-do list in the background. It might feel like restlessness. It might feel like a low-level anxiety. Or it might feel like just a kind of flatness, like you can't quite enjoy the thing that you're doing because you feel like you haven't earned that rest yet. And here's the thing that I find really striking about this. It is so incredibly common. Like almost everyone I talk to about this immediately recognizes it. It's not a niche experience. But because we don't always share these harder points of our life, it's often more the highlight reel. A lot of people assume that they're the only one that secretly feels bad for taking a Sunday afternoon off, but you're not. I have this conversation with my clients and my friends actually so often. The other thing that I want to note is that rest guilt is not the same as laziness, even though these two things get quite tangled up when we talk about this topic. Laziness actually means that you're avoiding effort when something needs doing, where the rest guilt it's pretty much the opposite actually. It's the discomfort that comes when you try to stop doing and something inside won't let you. Does that make sense? So where is this coming from? Because understanding that is actually really important. We're going to go back in history a little bit. I think this is really interesting, but like maybe I'm a bit biased because this is my niche. So in 1905, a German sociologist called Max Weber wrote a book called The Protestant Ethic. And is that right? The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. I'm probably not even saying that right, but anyway. And his argument was that certain Protestant religious traditions, particularly one that I can't really pronounce with my braces, my mouth's really sore, I've just been to the dentist, I had a few things changed, and it makes pronouncing certain words so difficult. But basically, he was saying that this changed how people thought about work, and work stopped being just a way to, earn money to survive, and it became something more like a moral duty. It became a sign of your worth. And idleness, as in just being still, idleness was something to be afraid of. Have you heard that phrase, idle hands are the devil's workshop? Like that became a really common phrase. So Weber wasn't just writing about religious people in the 1500s. He was writing about how these ideas outlasted the religion that made them and how they got baked into culture, into institutions, into the way societies organize themselves and how they rewarded people. So, the theology or the religion might have faded out a little bit, but this concept of work becoming a moral duty really stayed with us. And you can see it everywhere. How many people do you know, maybe even yourself, that use busyness like a badge of honour? When someone asks you how you are and you say, I've been so busy, there's a certain satisfaction in that, a sense of legitimacy, like being busy proves you matter. We have a whole cultural vocabulary around this, the hustle culture, rise and grind, the idea that if you're not working on something, you're falling behind. And social media has absolutely supercharged this because now you have a constant stream of what everyone else is achieving, making, building, doing, running in the background of your life at all times. So when you sit down to rest, you're not just fighting your own mind, you're pushing back against a really long and deeply embedded cultural message that says your value is your output. And that's a pretty big thing to be up against. I used to see this quite a lot when I worked in big organizations. There was always that person that constantly talked about how busy they were all the time. Sometimes I joke about that person that's so busy being busy they don't get anything done. I'm sure that you can all probably think of a person like that. But there's more to this than just culture. Because if it was purely cultural, everyone would experience rest guilt in the same way, and they don't. Some people can switch it off quite easily, and others feel genuine distress when they stop. Like something bad is going to happen if they're not constantly doing something. And that difference can actually come down to what we learned usually very early on about what makes us acceptable. Here's what I mean. So this is just an example. This isn't going to be applicable for everybody that experiences this, but I think it's a good example. So if you grew up in a household where you got warmth and praise when you achieved things, when you did well at school, when you were helpful, when you stayed busy and productive, you learnt a rule. And that rule was, I'm okay when I'm doing and achieving. That's an unconscious decision. It's just sort of what young people do. They figure out how to get love and approval and they build their sense of themselves around what works. Again, I'm not saying that everybody who experiences rest guilt has had this experience, but I think it's a great example. So the problem with that rule is that it doesn't go away when you grow up. It just kind of goes underground and it shows up as a voice that says rest is premature, that you haven't earned it yet, that list of things needs to be done first, except the list never ends. So the rest is never quite earned. And there's also something that happens at a physical level in the nervous system. For a lot of people, if you grew up somewhere unpredictable, say there was a lot of conflict or tension, or you had parents that were emotionally unreliable, your nervous system learns to stay on alert, like it needs to be on high alert all the time. So stillness didn't feel safe. So the moment you experience stillness now as an adult, it feels like a threat essentially, because it's saying, hang on a minute, you need to be on guard. And the thing is that wiring doesn't automatically update when your life circumstances change. So like I said, if now it's perfectly safe as an adult to, not need to be doing anything or be anywhere, your body's probably still running that old program and still scanning and isn't quite able to let go and to truly rest. And that's why you can know in your head that you need to rest and still be completely unable or feel like you're completely unable to actually do it. The knowing and the feeling are just two separate things. So here's the irony of all of this. We feel guilty for resting because we're afraid it'll make us less productive. But the science is really clear. It actually makes you significantly more productive. Or not resting makes you significantly less productive, right? So let's look at sleep because it's the most researched. We have really solid evidence now. Like, there is so much science showing us that even one night of poor sleep can meaningfully inhibit your ability to think clearly, make decisions, and to pay attention. It's actually a very measurable and real effect. Sleep is where your brain consolidates memories, where your body repairs itself, and your nervous system resets. But let's look at waking rest for a moment, not just when you're asleep. So, in the early 2000s, a neuroscientist whose name I'm going to butcher, but I'll try and pronounce it anyway, Marcus Raichle. That's absolutely not right. I'm so sorry. I'll try and put his name in the show notes. So if you want to look him up, you can. But he was doing brain scans and he noticed something really interesting. When people weren't doing anything, when they were just resting and their mind was wandering, so they weren't listening to anything, they weren't being stimulated by anything, they were literally just sitting there resting, certain parts of their brain actually became more active. Now, this is called the default mode network. You might have heard it. I've seen it popping up in social media a lot more recently, and it's involved in some really important things like processing emotions, making sense of our experiences, generating creative ideas, imagining future scenarios, and building that kind of insight that doesn't come from focused effort. It comes from just letting the mind drift and wander. So when you lie on the couch and you zone out, you're not actually doing nothing. Your brain is doing background processing that it cannot do when you're focused on a task. You're actually giving it something that it really needs. And when we fill every gap with our phones, a podcast, how ironic, or constant stimulation, we're taking that away and we're never letting the system do its maintenance. All right, so now that you know all of this, how do we actually change it? Because just rest more probably isn't that useful to you. Like, if it was that easy, I probably wouldn't have a job. So let's try changing the frame first, or let's try reframing, as I usually say. Instead of thinking of rest as time taken away from productivity, let's think of it as part of the process. So high level athletes know this, right? Recovery isn't what happens after training, it's what makes the training work. So the adaptation, the improvement, the whole point of it that happens during rest, not during the effort. So without the recovery, you wouldn't get better, you just get injured. And the same is true for our brain and our emotional system. The output needs recovery. That's just how it works. So framing the rest that way as maintenance, as a necessary maintenance, not as indulgence, can really help you shift how you view rest. So it actually becomes part of the productivity, not just something that you can indulge in after you've been productive. And next, let's get a bit curious about where your specific version of rest guilt is coming from. So for some people, it really is mostly cultural. It's the ambient noise of society that's obsessed with busyness, and recognizing that can help you take it a bit less personally, and you can start to see the guilt as a message that you've absorbed, not the truth about your situation. For others, it can run a bit deeper, and it can be tied to old beliefs about being good enough, about what might happen if you stop doing. And if that's you, there might be a bit more work to be done, and it could be worth exploring that with your own psychologist or counselor and having some individualized support with that, because it can take a little bit of work to work through those, basically. The third is to learn the difference between rest and avoidance. They can look the same from the outside, but the feeling is different on the inside. Avoidance is when you're scrolling or watching TV not to rest, but to not feel something, to avoid an uncomfortable feeling or task that you don't want to face. It tends to leave you feeling flat or vaguely worse. So this might be where I'm working on something difficult and I'm not sure how to do it, and I instinctively want to pick up my phone to avoid the discomfort of trying to do something that feels really difficult. Genuine rest has a different quality. There might be some initial discomfort, as we've been discussing, particularly if slowing down isn't something that you're used to. But underneath that, there's usually something that feels more like a release, like your body settling. So once you've really eased into it, maybe it takes 10 or 15 minutes, then you might feel this sense of release. Hopefully, that's what we want. It takes practice to tell them apart, though, especially at first. So paying attention to how you feel afterwards is a really good place to start. Or what's driving the rest in the first place? Are you actually trying to avoid a feeling? It's worth taking note of. The fourth tip is to try making rest deliberate. So there's research on something called psychological detachment, and that's the idea of genuinely switching off from work, mentally, just not physically. And it constantly shows that people who can do this have better well-being and are less likely to burn out. And one of the things that helps with that is intentionality. Rest that you've decided to take that has a shape and a time tends to feel more legitimate than rest that just happens. So your brain can relax into it because it's not technically unplanned, it's on the schedule. So if spontaneous rest feels impossible, try putting it into the calendar. Because remember that rest is part of productivity. So you can schedule it into your week or your day, because that rest makes you more productive, and not having that rest will make you less productive. So a final note that a lot of us are waiting for permission to rest. We're waiting until the list is done, until we've done enough, until we've proved enough. But that list never truly clears. We're always moving the bar, and the rest just keeps getting deferred. So here's what I want to say to that. The guilt you feel when you rest is not a signal that you haven't done enough. A lot of the time, it's just a very old, very well practiced habit. It's a conditioned response. And conditioned responses, even really old ones, can actually change. You weren't born out of the womb thinking that you didn't deserve to rest, right? It's something that you've learnt over time, which means it's something that can change over time as well. So rest is not something that you earn. It is not a reward that you get at the end of suffering, or at the end of achieving, or at the end of being overly productive. It's the thing that your body and your brain actually need, the same way that they need water or food or sleep. And you're not doing it wrong when you take it. You're allowed to rest, not because you've finished everything, but because you actually need it. And if you don't take that rest, eventually your body will force you to do it. That's why people end up burnt out, or they end up becoming unwell. It's because they haven't given their body enough rest along the way. You know that saying about how your body will whisper to you, and if you don't listen, it'll yell at you. And if you don't listen, it'll scream at you. That's what happens. So make sure you're giving your body that rest before it starts to scream at you. So that's it for today's episode. If this resonated, or if you really recognize yourself in this discussion, I'd really love to hear from you. You can contact me on Instagram or TikTok, both accounts. I'm april.saltmarsh. And if rest guilt feels like more than just an occasional thing for you, if it's part of a bigger pattern, if you're running on empty and you can't figure out how to stop, please do consider talking to somebody about it, because it's something that really does respond well to the right support. Like, you can work through this and you don't need to feel guilty about resting for the rest of your life, right? If you have someone in your life that you think might benefit from it, please feel welcome to share it with them. I really do think that there's a lot of people out here that could benefit from listening to this, which is why I wanted to talk about it for this episode. But that's it from me. Take care of yourselves. Seriously, schedule in some rest.